But this week, oh, was it this week? Yes. That was Monday, the
Yeah,
22nd, or is that Tuesday? I don't know how days work anymore. On the 22nd,
yeah.
Sean
Let's go with
King
that.
tweeted, and I think Dan has it pulled up, so I'm going to say tweeted this, and Dan's going to magically read it.
Okay, yes, I think the statues of the white European they claim is Jesus should come down. They are a form of white supremacy, always have been. In the Bible, when the family of Jesus wanted to hide and blend in, guess where they went? Egypt, not Denmark. Tear them down. I actually like that
That's
though.
a
The,
really
the
good
whole,
line.
like, when the family of Jesus wanted to hide and blend in, guess where they went? Egypt, not Denmark. But I mean, there are people who would argue that, like, there was like a non-African Egypt kind of framework,
I mean,
that the Egyptians were Europeans.
oh no, they're not Europeans, but Egyptians are not sub-Saharan Africans either.
Well, not all Africans are sub-Saharan Africans. That
Well,
doesn't
that
mean anything.
literally is how that works. But they're not pigmented. The level of melanin is not the same in an Egyptian as a sub-Saharan African
Right.
usually,
But that
because
but that doesn't make them white, as
no,
some census reports would claim.
absolutely not. Which is still crazy. Um, just in case you're not completely clear on how pigment works, it's partly genetic, but it's also partly just uh, a product of your environment,
Right.
right?
But
Like
that's also the reason why there were some people who were, yeah, there were some racists who thought that if we just migrate Africans out of Africa and bring them into our climate, then they'll turn white like us and their hair will grow straight. So it'll all work.
yeah, that
We can just
that's
make them white.
that sort of witchcraft doesn't work. That's not how this works. Um,
That's not how
so
any of this works.
so we've heard a lot of conversations about
Hmm.
Sean, about um, the images, different parts of different places, and I guess I didn't know that much about Sean King. I just knew of him,
Right.
right? And I've known him. I've known his work. Some of the things he advocates for, I'm completely for. He does.
Other
He
things he
does.
advocates for.
Yes, he does really good job of advocating for justice for different individuals, and I think that that's something that should be applauded.
Hmm.
Well, to an extent, I guess, define justice, but that's a whole other issue, I guess, at
Well,
this point.
that's a different issue altogether.
Right, we're not there. But given the framework, I think he does some good things. He was a pastor. I think he's currently still, according to his Twitter feed, which I was going through before this, he's still an ordained minister. I don't know if that's something that just doesn't go away. You know how ordination is different from different places.
Well, I'm just trying to. Never mind. Nope.
Um,
Not gonna say it. Keep going.
so he did start a church in Atlanta, um, and was there for about 4 years before he kind of burned out,
Hmm.
according to some of the things he said and what I've read on the always reputable Wikipedia. So
Always.
take it for what it is, okay? Just
For
I
anyone who
understand,
ever has a class with me, if you're citing Wikipedia, you will get an F.
but also
Just so you know.
listen. If you have a class with Dan, don't cite Wikipedia. Go to the sources and just follow that link. Come on, it's not that hard. It's not rocket surgery.
Don't go giving
Um,
away all my secrets.
I know, right? So to say that we're not saying if we just okay, going back to our civil discourse in uncivil times,
Right.
we're not saying that Sean is evil.
No.
We're just gonna agree and disagree with him at different points of this conversation. And
You mean
so
that's possible?
I know. I really am mad that our live video post didn't go up because I really thought my nuance comment was hilarious.
It was.
Um, I don't even know what it said because Facebook was dumb today. Um, okay, so let's start.
I'm.
We started with Sean, talked a little bit about him, right? What were you gonna say?
Hmm.
Did you have something else there?
No, no, no.
Okay,
Keep
just
going.
just make sure I didn't step on you. Um,
Ow.
you're welcome. We should talk then about Jesus. So Jesus is the first part of this tweet, correct?
Right.
Okay. So
Well, actually, I would say not even Jesus is the first part of the tweet, really.
okay, what's the first part? I guess I don't
He
have it in
says,
front of me.
yes,
So.
I think the statues of the white European they claim is Jesus should come down.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we're gonna start with Jesus because that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
So we
Jesus
start with
is always a
Jesus.
great place to start.
Number one. So Jesus is, as Paul says, the image of the invisible God, and as Jesus says, if you've seen me,
You've seen the Father.
you've seen the Father. So, Jesus is the image of God. Is there any question about this?
There shouldn't be from
Okay.
anyone who calls themselves a follower of Jesus.
I would hope so. But we have laid our groundwork.
Yes.
So, that leads us to our second statement, which is that we are not supposed to make any images of God. Is that what it says, though?
Is it? Are you
don't
sure
think-
about that?
I'm second guessing myself here, Dan. And now I'm going to look
Well.
up the exact wording.
Which version?
I'm going to go with the net so that I can take a glance at the Hebrew that I barely understand.
No, I mean, which version? I don't mean Bible translation.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to go to the first one,
So Exodus
Exodus chapter 20,
20. Okay.
and this is verse 4. I do like the net says carved image,
Right.
and not idol. I like that a lot better.
That's what the ESV also says, just
Does
an
it?
FYI. Yep.
Because the word idol is the same word as image. For those of you who are like, why are they talking about this? And so when it says that they were made in the image of God, that would also be the idol of God. And so when you say idol, you're bringing in a theological slant that doesn't necessarily exist in the text.
So are you saying that we shouldn't actually have these carved images or idols of God because he has already done a great job of making an image of himself, which is humanity?
I would say possibly.
Okay.
I don't want to like give it a hard, like definite.
No, I'm just tossing an idea out there.
Verse 4 says, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the water below. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, responding to the transgressions of fathers by dealing with children to the third and fourth generations of those who reject me." It's funny, because we talked about that verse in Exodus 34, verse 6, which I told you I wasn't going to forget anymore, because it's the name of God. And it's the same exact line, the transgression of the fathers by dealing with the children to the third and fourth generations. But now we're in like the second generation of segregation, and we don't want to deal with that sin anymore. But I'm going to go ahead and stop there before I keep going. And showing covenant faithfulness to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. So obviously covenant faithfulness goes further than any sort of responding to punishment type words.
Exactly.
And I understand that there is two sentences here in the "you shall not make an image" and "you shall not bow down to them or serve them." But they're even if they're two sentences, it's one thought.
Right. And I think we also have to realize editorial, like punctuation is editorial when it comes to our Bible. So
Yes, most often. Especially in Ephesians chapter 3 or Ephesians
chapter 1, verse. Oh, you try reading that sucker on a Sunday morning while you're in church. I turned around one time and I was going. I'm like, I have to take a breath. I'm out of. Oh, great. I'm not.
This sentence will end someday.
Yes.
Like, what is it? It's chapter 1 verses 2 to 13 is one sentence. Does that sound right?
Like, that sounds about right. But I'm just like,
It's
really?
long. Yeah. So
Really, people?
when we look at this verse, we we need to do some good hermeneutical stuff. First off, let's look at it through the historical perspective. Um, we're gonna make a tabernacle here in just a second, Dan. What do you
Okay.
put in a temple and or tabernacle in the ancient Near East?
Generally speaking, like an image of the god.
Right. So you put an image of the god in there so that you know what you're looking at and worshiping.
Right.
Right. So this one's like, no, don't do that. And it
You mean this is why people were like, wait, why is this little area empty right here? Like, there's no God in here.
that's why they're called
Somehow,
atheists. Um,
but somehow,
and so that's what you do with the temple. You put the image of the god in the temple, and so this is hearkening back to the creation moments when God makes the earth and then puts His image into
In the
the
area.
temple,
yes.
and we are that image. So
What?
yes, this goes back to that, but it's also the idea that you don't have any other gods before God. Like those two are, while they're two separate commandments, are also kind of the same because you worship images. Like you make a golden calf and worship it. Like those are two parts of the same whole. You can't worship Canaanite deities without an idol or
Right.
some sort of representation.
You got to have something.
So then Dan, to go back to your question, does this pertain to statues and images of Jesus?
Traditionally, that has been the take on it. At the same time, it's like one of those, does it, does it not? I would say it boils down to the idea of attempting to, I don't want to go here yet, but I'm going to jump here. In so many ways, I would say that this particular verse provides us a warning against creating God in our image, as opposed to recognizing that we are created in His image. And it prohibits us from creating God or attempting to create God in the image of any other thing that is in creation.
Right. So a bird, that's going to step on some toes. A bird is not God. I totally chose a bird randomly.
I was like,
and it just went there.
but
A cow is not God. A sphinx is not God.
I'm gonna still
Right.
go back to the bird, but
I was thinking eagle, and then just came out bird. And then,
eagles. You just went you went there now.
I went
Okay.
there too, man. I'm on a roll. I'm just gonna. But these things they're not supposed to be God. And they're not God. And so they can't
Right.
serve as depictions of God because we are the depiction of God.
Right.
We are His image, which is a powerful anthropological statement,
Yes.
which should carry over for so much. But for a lot
But
of
we
people,
failed to fulfill that.
right, it just kind of falls short. Okay, so we've got our biblical underpinnings here. We know who Jesus is, I think. So now we turn to history.
Oh.
And I did homework.
Oh, you did. Justo Gonzalez.
Oh, I have no clue this is in frame. I should go check.
It is. You're good.
It's in your frame. Is it in the other? There we go. Okay, it's in frame. We're good.
Yeah. Yes.
It's delayed. So I gotta
But based on positioning, it's in front of your face, so I know
fair
it's
enough.
in frame.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. So, this is Justo Gonzalez. It's on page 305 if you're looking for it. It's about halfway in the first chapter. So in the 8th century, several Byzantine emperors took steps against images. Emperor Leo, who ruled from 717 to 741, not the Pope, different guy, opened the controversy when he ordered the destruction of a statue of Jesus that was highly regarded by many of the faithful. I just thought that was hilarious. Like, that's what we're talking about. That's literally what happened. In 754, Constantine V, Leo's son and successor, called a council that forbade the use of images and condemned those who defended them. So this would be the time of the iconoclast, and I'm going to say this word wrong, but I'm going to try. Iconodules?
Actually,
Duels? Jewels? I don't know. Iconoclasts were destroyers of images, and iconodules, worshippers of image. You know what? It's got to be from dulia. Is dulia Latin? A lesser worshipful veneration?
no, it's from Greek.
That is Greek? Okay.
From iconodoulos, which is one who serves images, because a doulos is a
Yeah.
slave
So
or a
okay. Yeah.
servant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. So then so we have
Man, who knew that studying ancient languages would help you with this stuff?
it's crazy. So the assembly and you know what? As soon as I said it, I was like, you know what was getting me? The idea of worship, because obviously doulos is like that's
Servant. Yeah.
right. That makes sense.
But to serve is to worship. So yeah.
Right. So
Keep
that took
going.
me. Latria.
Mhm.
That's the assembly. So this was in the Nicene Council of 787. The assembly distinguished between worship in the strict sense, latria, which is only due to God, and a lesser worshipful veneration, dulia, which is to be given to images. So that's why they got the iconodules name. So that's why I feel comfortable saying iconodules, because it's off of. Yeah. Okay. You get the idea. So historically, we've already had this conversation,
Right.
and we did not come to a conclusion.
What?
Feels like so many of the Christological arguments like had some sort of eventual, like, okay, this is what we're doing. This one does not feel like that at all.
Yeah. Well, I think that part of the issue that we run into is, how do we are we if we are simply looking at the idea of the images themselves, that's one thing. But I think what King is actually pointing out is that the creation of these images as they have been created is actually a form of white supremacy. And in an attempt to respond to white supremacy and bring an end to white supremacy, then these manifestations of white supremacy that are found within the Christian tradition should therefore be destroyed.
Do you think his argument would have gone over better? And not saying that this matters, but do you think his argument would have gone over better if he had appealed to the second commandment? Because he didn't. In those tweets, there was not an appeal to it. Do you think that there would have been any backlash, any sort of anything?
Yes.
You think so? You think it would have been the same?
I don't think it would have been the same. Here's why. You would have those individuals who would say, we don't need to have these statues of like saints and of Jesus and all of it. So you would have had those people.
Right.
But if he had appealed to the second commandment, there wouldn't have been a discussion from those individuals. But the moment he jumps to them being a form of white supremacy, well, now you're attacking me because,
right.
And I'm like, well, are you a white supremacist? I mean,
listen, I don't have the conversation.
I mean, because if you are a white supremacist, yes, you have been attacked. If you are not a white supremacist, there was no attack on you. So
that's not how I perceived it. No, I'm just kidding.
But I think that's the key thing. You have this whole idea that he's attacking white supremacy. He's not really making a claim based on biblical principle. He is making a claim based on anti-racist ideology.
And I don't. So.
And I'm not saying that anti-racist ideology is wrong. I mean, in this respect.
And if you followed me on Facebook, you know that like I've already made a statement about this. So it's not like this is going to be new information. This is just kind of us talking through it. Yeah, and I don't disagree with him. In part.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like there have been times and places that white Jesus was used as a club. So for instance, when the missionaries went to Africa while the European nations are raping the land of all of its resources and
We choose to give
people.
you white Jesus because, but here's what happens
Can
with
you
that.
imagine though? Like, can you imagine if someone is literally tearing you apart, and then someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, here's this white Jesus who looks just like me, who looks just like the people tearing your country apart." I don't understand
Do
how.
I want anything to do with that deity?
I don't think so. And I understand, I understand why no one would want anything to do with that deity. I can understand, like, a complete rejection of that because that's gross.
Right. But here's the thing, though. When you stop and you look at entire frameworks of religion and colonialism, there is this idea that we want you to worship this God, but at the same time, oh, take a look at U.S. slavery for a moment. There are numbers of people who say, well, the benefit, I mean, I've actually heard people attempt to utilize this to justify American slavery. And I'm like, I want to smack you across your face right now, but that would not be showing the love of Jesus. That, well, the descendants of slaves and slaves, I mean, well, they did get Christianity because of the fact that they were slaves. When you stop and look back, especially in the early days of slavery, you know, let's say even pre-formation of the country, based on like British law, you could not enslave a Christian. And so many slave owners and slave holders actually fought against the idea of preaching the gospel to slaves because they felt like, well, if they become slaves, then we have to set them free. And then we lose out on our economic prosperity. So then it began to be reinterpreted, whereas, well, you can't enslave someone who's already a Christian, but if your slave becomes a Christian, then you can actually utilize the scriptures to teach them to obey their masters
Right.
and move forward in life. So, I mean, in so many ways, the whole framework of white Jesus was a tool, an abusive tool in the hands of racists and those who held to racist ideology in order to manipulate individuals one way or another. Because what you do is you present the supreme being is like me, and because the supreme being is like me, then you have to obey me. Otherwise, you're going to make the supreme being that looks like me really upset with you.
Which falls directly into line with so much of American Christianity.
Yes.
Right? Like
Notice, not
it's
biblical Christianity,
no,
American Christianity.
absolutely not. No, it's the one where if you don't do this, God will send you to hell because he is mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so it's easier to take that onto yourself when you've put it onto others first.
Right.
Yeah. This excursus has been brought to you by American Christianity. American Christianity for all your flag cross needs.
You're crazy.
That'd be a great Babylon Bee article if they weren't so crazy already. I feel so bad for them. They were once so good. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Just like Babylon. So, they're the bee. What are you going to do? So,
Right.
so let's talk about like what it would look like then. Okay, so let's go over what we've gone over. We know what Jesus is.
Mm-hmm.
What Jesus is, who Jesus is.
Who Jesus is.
English is my first language, so I'm not great at it. Now that I've got it in my head, I wonder if people are better at speaking once they become fluent in second languages, if they're better at second languages than they are at first languages, right? Because the rules have been implanted differently than the rules for their own language. Because
Usually you get better at your first language along with gaining your second language.
that's probably true. Okay, so we know who Jesus is. We know what the second commandment says. We know what Genesis says. We know what happened in the past, and we know how white Jesus was used
Right.
improperly. So, is there a proper place for white Jesus?
If you are attempting to contextualize the gospel for people who are not aware of Jesus, that would mandate that you contextualize within the framework of actually is there.
So,
Mm,
I think that there is
go
a
ahead.
place. But if white Jesus is the only Jesus that you see, then it's wrong. So, if I have
Okay.
and
Okay.
I don't have it ready to start throwing up images. Maybe I'll be more prepared next time. But if you have like Korean Jesus, if you have never seen Korean Jesus, I encourage you to Google it
Yes.
because it is amazing. Because it will rock your world to see Jesus depicted as something you've never seen before if you've never seen it. So if you have Korean Jesus, Chinese Jesus, Black Jesus, Mexican Jesus, right? If you have this multi-ethnic depictions of Jesus, I think it's just as wrong to not have white Jesus there as it is to only have white Jesus. I think that if you're gonna, you need to have the spectrum if you're gonna have him.
So here's a question for you.
Maybe not that lily white, the one we used, is not like the looking up into heaven one, because that one's a little creepy the longer you look at it. But like just a general depiction of white Jesus. Sorry.
No, no, I hear what you're saying. No, as I think about it, here's my thing: is that the only way you can really justify a depiction of white Jesus, black Jesus, like Korean Jesus, you know, like indigenous Jesus, fill in the blank with whichever Jesus you want to fill in the blank with, is to identify the fact that it was not a limitation of God based on race or ethnicity or nationality, but to highlight the fact that God became human. Notice, I'm not even saying that God became man, but
No.
that God became human
Right. Took on
and
flesh.
dwelt and tabernacled among us. And if
Exactly.
that is the case, I can see some reasoning behind it. But then, this is going to sound crazy. Let's give white Jesus a makeover if that's the case.
For sure. And he does not need to have blue eyes. He does not need to be the pretty white Jesus. Like that's probably more inappropriate. Let's make him at least look average, right? There's nothing in the text tells us that he looked above average, that he was substantial. And the text goes
Actually leads
up
you to the opposite conclusion.
right, and the text goes above and beyond to tell us when that's the case.
Right.
Right?
Because
Like
I would even say, you know what? And this is going to sound really weird, and maybe it's just my quote unquote rebellious nature against assimilationist thought. But, the pretty Jesus does not look good to me. I mean,
Fabio Jesus, as it were.
yeah, Fabio Jesus does not look like an image of beauty to me. Fabio Jesus looks like what is this?
I
Like,
mean,
who is this?
and the thing is, again, the text tells us that Saul stood head and shoulders above everyone else. The text tells us
Right.
that Absalom had beautiful hair. The text tells us that Esau is ruddy, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
have Luke pulling from the Old Testament repeatedly. If this Jesus fellow was somebody who had those traits, it's hard to imagine that Luke wouldn't have thrown it in there somewhere.
Right. Wait, check this out. Nikki's made a couple of comments I think are very poignant. Um, she says it's the same reasoning behind why people who grew up with abusive earthly fathers struggle to understand the unconditional love of the heavenly Father. If you are abused, mistreated, hated, and oppressed by a people group, it will be difficult or near impossible to trust or worship a deity that looks like that people group.
And on that note, did you see Pete N's latest video?
I have not seen Pete's video.
So his latest video that I saw was on Elohim
Mm-hmm.
and using the pronoun they for God.
Mm-hmm.
Because Elohim is plural,
Plural. Mm-hmm.
and God is genderless, the Father. And so when we talk about the Heavenly Father, for people who do have that bad relationship with the Father, I can understand completely how that could be, just devastating. And
But people are going to squawk against that within their patriarchalism or kyriarchy. So, I mean, if you have patriarchy and kyriarchy in the mix, it's just another form of.
oh, absolutely, this is the same side of the same coin.
Right.
Excuse me. Where again, the gospel itself creates offense, because if I say that Jesus is Lord, that means that I am not. We joke all the time, and I I said at the beginning of the year, my hashtag for the year was hashtag no king but Caesar.
Yes.
And people have reminded me, Caleb Cook in particular has reminded me how poignant that has been this year. But when you look at that original sin, and it is a rebellion against God to say, I want to do this, I am better at this than God is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it goes on and it says, now when we look in, we say, now Jesus is Lord. That literally means that he is coming back to reclaim that status that he had prior to this. And he is the one who is in charge of my life. And if Jesus is Lord, that means I'm not. It's that reverse of the curse that happens. I don't remember where I was going with that. Oh, that's offensive because it means that I'm not in charge anymore. Right?
So what?
So we need to make sure that other offenses aren't there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if Jesus is white is going to hurt your evangelism effort, then don't portray Jesus as white. I don't understand why that's difficult.
But Jesus is white because I'm creating. I mean, I'm going to create God in a way that I can utilize God to subjugate other people.
Well, and that's not Christianity.
But I can misuse and abuse the Bible to assert it as such.
You can, but that means you're not Christian.
But that has happened how often throughout the church's
history? It's been
history?
the dominant. Since 400, it's been the way we've done a lot of things. Right? You've had a few movements here and there that have really gotten it right and moved the right direction. But overall, I think that, there are issues. So in here, like, if, again, I want to go back. I'm not saying that we need to keep white Jesus. I think white Jesus has a place. But if your statue in front of your building is super white Jesus, then yeah, it should probably come down. I don't think that's it, especially in America. I might be like harder pressed if we were in Finland, right?
Okay.
Because it's not a melting. America is the melting pot, or it's supposed to be.
Why can't we just be a mosaic like Canada?
Oh, because Canada.
Did I say that out loud? Oops.
Because Canada does a lot of things right. But like, if that's the case, then we need to remove the offense.
Mm-hmm.
And as Christians, that's like, it feels like that's what the call is. It's not to plant our flag in the ground and say this is my right.
But that's the American way, because America.
Oh man, so I'm starting my last class. Started it this week, and Joel Lawrence does a great job in his first lecture in Christian ethics on rights and specifically freedoms, and he knocked it out of the park. He's not watching this, but man, if he was, shout out to Joel Lawrence on that one, because It was really solid the way he
Nice.
just laid it out.
Mhm.
It was solid because it completely agreed with everything I believe, and he did a better job laying it out than I could. So
I'm not going to
that's
make any comment about the first part. The second part, I'll be like, right on, okay?
that's how you know it's good. Um, so that's where I'm at. Again, if there's an image, and this is like putting everything together. So I think it's important that we do see God in our image. Like that's natural. As a kid, that's what I did. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I have conversations with God, and in those conversations, this might shock you, Dan, but he's sarcastic, and we like to laugh
Okay.
because that's who I am. Right? God communicates with me in a way that works for me. I don't know if he communicates that way with everyone.
I'm pretty sure he doesn't. I mean, I'll give you a prime example of God and communication and things that I'm like, yeah, there's no way that that would be, I wouldn't have said that. So I'm in a church service one time. This is a church in the Pentecostal tradition. And so there was a person who got the microphone and they were going to pray. And they sensed they had a word from the Lord. And I remember, I distinctly remember they took the microphone and before they began to pray, they said, you know, God won't screw you. And they said it again.
There are some things that God says to me sometimes that I don't think I would say out loud. And that might be something that might be in that vein.
And so what ends up
Not that he
happening,
said that to me before. So
yeah, but I'm just sitting there. Well, I'm standing there. I'm like, what? What? And I'm like, yeah, no, the Lord knew not to say that one to me because I would not have said that. That's yeah, nope, not would have been worse. Even if
right.
it came through my mind, would not have come out of my mouth. But here was what I kept thinking. I said, but I really do sense that there are people in here who need to hear that this morning. Literally, there were 5 people who went up to that person after the service and was like, thank you so much. That statement ministered to me so much because of the things that I'm going through. And I felt like God was just mistreating me and that God had abandoned me and all of this stuff. And I'm like, see, all right,
Right.
no comment.
So God, if God can do that on an individual level, I believe that he can do that with the images that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, we'll take another step, I think, in a little bit, but it doesn't make sense. Again, if that's the only image that your church has, yes, it should come down.
And that's the key thing.
If there are multiple, if you're going to have multiple images of Jesus, then have them be multi-ethnic. Because I guarantee you that if you went into a church and you were the minority and in that church there was a Jesus who looked just like you would think differently about that church. And if you didn't know Jesus, you would think differently about Jesus too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you walked into a church, Dan, and there was a depiction of black Jesus, how would you feel about that church and how they're going to treat you?
First, I'm like, okay, wait, okay, I'm welcome here.
Right. Right. And this is where white privilege comes in. Guess what I've never felt at a church? Unwelcome.
You've never felt unwelcome.
Never.
Dude, let me tell you, I have been into some churches. And it's funny, whenever I go into a new church, if I don't know the church, especially, I mean, like, I live in Springfield, Missouri, like Whiteville, USA for the most part. I go into a church and I'm like, okay, should I stay or should I go now? Like, and I'm always like, okay, like, let's see. Because trust me, I have had some really crazy, funkified stuff said to me by people in churches. And I'm like, I'm never going back to that place again. Bunch of crazy people.
Right. And it seems to me that having those images would be welcoming. And again, we're trying to limit the offense that the gospel already has, right? No king but Jesus is a hard
Right.
thing to accept. So if we're putting up other barriers to people coming to accept, that seems like a problem. But again, I want to hammer this home because I don't think I can hammer it enough. If white Jesus is the only Jesus that you have in your church, you got to fix it.
Right.
You
Now,
got two options.
here's something really funny. So there is a church in the Chicago area, Saint Sabina's.
Okay.
Now, wait, wait, Saint Sabina in Chicago? Yeah, Saint Sabina's in Chicago. It is under the leadership, last time I checked, of a very controversial minister,
Okay.
Father Michael Flager.
The name sounds familiar, which means that he probably is controversial.
Well, here's what ends up happening. Now, for those who don't know, Father Flager is white.
How white is he?
Oh, he's a white man.
Okay.
Like,
Like if you offered him mayonnaise.
he might eat it straight out the jar white. But here's the thing about this church. When you walk in, now remember, you are in Chicago.
Yes.
You got Black Jesus. Boom. Like right there. And I think that is one of those unique pieces that you have to look at and recognize is that, you know what? It's not simply a matter of, oh, wait a minute. There are these people here. There are these things that are going on. But when you stop and you reflect on who you actually have, who your audience is, and what dynamic you are attempting to facilitate in order to remove these stumbling blocks and barriers. I mean, this is the reason why, think about it for a moment. When you hear about statues of all of these people, or particularly early church people who have been whitewashed in some situations, or like Jesus's family, all these people, there's an expectation now within the Christian framework, within, I would say, North America and in Europe, that, oh, all of these people were just plain lily white, like European white, like Aryan white. Let's get real specific.
Right.
Like, and it's like, that was not the case. And I think to propagate that, I think here's the issue with white Jesus that I would go to. If you were saying this is a depiction of Jesus that we have created within this culture, sweet. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
But when you say this is Jesus, this is what Jesus looks like, this is like, now I'm like,
well, and that's, I mean, yeah, like you said, if the only Jesus you have up is white Jesus, that's what you're saying.
right.
When you have multiple Jesuses up, you're saying these are depictions of him. Right? You've immediately switched the conversation. And I think this goes to something, well, hold on. I want to grab this book because it's staring me in the face and I want to like look at it for a second.
Okay.
You know this book. Introducing the New Testament by Mark Allen Powell.
Mark Allen Powell. Oddly enough, mine is like on one of these shelves right here. That's why I was like, did you see my book in the, yeah, it's right here.
Oh, is it? No, I've been looking at mine.
I was like, huh?
Here's
I'm putting mine back on the shelf.
the best thing about this book.
It's all the multi-ethnic.
Oh man, I've got so many New Testament survey books, and like I think that my draw in my heart is New Testament in its world, just because I love NT Wright.
Boom.
Yeah, that was the first image.
Boom.
I was Hungarian.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was about to show the same one.
I will tell you, I used this book in class, and there were students who were like, wait a minute, what is this?
Right. And it's just so beautiful in its
Wait, go to page 48. Go to page 48. That's an awesome one that you should show.
Oh, yes.
Then 3 pages over, you got this puppy right here.
Yep.
And I'm like, you mean to tell me that we can actually embrace a Christianity that is global within its framework and how we depict the events, highlighting the fact that depicting the biblical events and highlighting the fact that God became human, that God did not become necessarily a white man or a black man or an Asian man, because that's not the point. But here's the thing. Have you noticed that in actuality, the framework that is often used to depict God as white, or Jesus in particular as white, has been with the aim of, how do I put this, of supporting the idea of white people as a superior race?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. Here we go.
And
I
because of
got the
that,
picture that I really wanted to
you got
find.
it.
It's the
Nice.
nativities.
Bring it
So
down just a little bit. There you go.
there we go. You can see
Yeah.
the nativities. And right, you
Mm-hmm.
can see the different cultures, how they view them. My page is folding. No, it's not, I guess.
Yeah, no, you're good. Oh, that's
Um,
perfect right there.
right. And so you get like this is Jesus. He is multi-ethnic. If he
Mm-hmm.
is the if he is the second Adam,
The last Adam.
then he is multi-ethnic, right? His goal is to
Mm-hmm.
bring everyone under this one ethnicity,
Right.
which is
Right.
Christ follower. I don't think that does away with our ethnicity, because that's a whole
No,
other group of people who are crazy.
I don't plan on being white at the resurrection. What?
I got jokes, but I'm not going to say them right now. I'll tell you later. Just remind me of that one.
Okay.
These are jokes that Dan and I will share, not with the stream, because I know my limits.
All I'm gonna say is this: Cotton Mather was wrong. Okay.
So whenever you see that, like, those are works of, and this is, I think, where I really want to go to, works of art. And I think the problem that I had most with Sean and others who have said this, similar things, is that I do not want to lose art.
Mm-hmm.
And I am concerned that if we say that Jesus has to look like he actually did, which is a whole other issue, but if we say that, we're taking our intellectual snobbery and our search for the historical Jesus, right? This is the Jesus Society on images. And to me, when we're made in the image of God, I don't think that that's just what I look like.
No.
Right? It's all the parts of us as humanity. And one of the major parts of us as humanity is creators. We are creators, just like our image giver. And if we say we can't create art, I think that breaks down what God intended his images to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want, if I draw a picture of Jesus and it's white, I don't want it to be because I'm a white supremacist. I want it to be, that's because who I am and how I see Jesus. Because I see him as me, like, we're being conformed to his image. Like, there's something there, and I'm not saying it well. I don't want Dan to draw pictures of white Jesus, because I don't expect that of him. And so I want our artists to be free in their expression, to express what works for them, because that's what art is. That's what
Now,
that
you
creation
want to hear something
is.
really funny when I think about this? Most ethnic minorities in the United States would only have an image of white Jesus unless they were introduced to other ethnic depictions of Jesus.
And that, I think, is where we need, we've said this before, white privilege is not about me tearing myself down to get to your level.
What?
It's, I mean, that's, and when I say your, I don't mean Dan. It's like a generic, like not privileged like me. So just, I know that no one watches us and like is gonna throw me under the bus there, but who knows? Maybe one day. So I'm not saying that, but like white privilege is not so that I bring myself down to the level of someone else. Like white privilege is me seeing someone who doesn't have that privilege and saying, "Hey, how do I figure out how to get that person where I'm at?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I get my employer to not look at someone's race whenever they're hiring? Not that my employer does that. I have a pretty good job and it's well defined, but like that's a thing that we know happens. You have a black name, it's more likely to not get an interview.
What I find funny is I actually have white friends who people think when they read their names that they are black. And then they're like, oh, oh.
They got they got to include that picture in the resume.
There are people who have to include the picture with the resume, like, hey, y'all, I'm white. Hire
Um,
me. I cannot determine. I could not determine what my parents named me.
bro, I read this thing the other day. Someone sent me, and they were like, "That's not really a thing." And so they posted this like Chicago Tribune article. Hold up, I'm getting there. And so they they said that it might not be because they thought the name was ethnic, but because they came from a lower social and economic status and may not have the same education level as people with other names. That's what this study said, and I was like, you do realize what you're saying, right? Like you're fully aware that what you're writing is what you're writing. And no, they had no clue. So they were like, okay, so what we did was we gave them more white names. I think they called them traditional names with traditional black and white last names like Washington and Jackson for the
But
black last names, and Thompson and something else for the white last names. And when they did that, there was no difference.
do they realize that the origin of most people's black last names came
No,
from
no, they did not. They did
slaveholders who
not
were
get it at
white?
all. And you, like I said, the black first names were like, oh man, I'm gonna mess them up, so I don't want to try. But like Jamal and it was Allah, a black girl first name. I can't remember what it was exactly. But they said, but that line where they were like, it might be because of a low, they perceived a lower education, basically. And I was like,
But
you
if you're
do
looking at
understand, like,
someone's,
right? Like that's
if you're looking at
literally
somebody's
racist.
resume,
That's
yeah.
what
But
we're.
if you, but hold on, let's just stop and think about
It's in the
this.
resume, dude. I don't know. I
Their
got nothing for you.
educational background is usually in the
It
resume.
made zero sense to me, and I was like, this is stupid. It was the worst. It was the worst for because people when you talk to
People.
them about these things, they want to try to find things that agree with them. And someone sent me that one. I don't even remember who it was. So if you're watching, I'm sorry. I'm not like trying. I'm not calling you out because I don't remember who it was. But I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever read in my entire life because it's just dumb.
Did the person who wrote did they have any formal education themselves?
I have
Don't
I
let's not
have
even
no
go there.
clue.
Let's get back to images and statues and icons. Yes.
Let's get back to the good stuff. Let's get back to the good stuff.
Yes.
Okay,
So when I
art.
stop and I look at this art, I think that there is beauty in art, and we need to embrace the beauty and the diversity that's within our artistic frameworks.
and
Absolutely.
and I think like if let's take King's idea that white Jesus is white supremacy.
Hmm?
Going back again, if the only thing that you have is white Jesus, then yes, there's white supremacy there, even if it's just in the way you depicted the art
Mhm.
as an artistic expression. If your artistic expression does not include like a wide variety of artistic expressions, and to that I mean minority artistic expressions, then there might be a problem with the way that we're depicting art.
Well, and I think that's part of the issue. I mean, consider this for a moment. If the heart behind it is that you're simply presenting an image of the Christ,
Mhm.
an image, Okay, you're good. But once you're presenting that image with a particular political, socio-political agenda, now you have done, you have transitioned from artistic expression into oppressive subjugation through the use of that which is deemed as an ultimate authority. You're now utilizing that which is a gospel of liberation to put people into bondage.
And that's just simply not Christian, or should not be seen as Christian, I guess is a
But
better
how
way to
many
put that.
people within but how many people within the church throughout history have done exactly that?
Oh, I mean, again, it happens today. Like if God,
I've become more and more convinced that if it were not for the grace of God, we would all just be in hell.
right, and it's his
I mean,
grace, not his anger.
right.
Like if your gospel is that God saves you from his own wrath, that is oppression. That's not freedom. That's not liberation. I'll say it again, just
Say it
for those
again
in
for
the
people in the
back.
back. Come on,
If
somebody.
if your view of salvation is that God saves you from his own wrath, that is oppressive. Right? If as a parent all my child ever sees is me sparing her from my wrath. Like, I'm really angry with you, but I'm not going to do anything about it right now. Or I'm really angry with you, but you did the right thing, and so I'm not going to do this. Or I'm really angry with you, but your mom stepped in, and so I'm not going to do anything about it. Like, that's not freedom. That is oppression.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's your view of salvation, you don't have a view of a redemptive God. You have a view of an oppressive God.
Do you think that maybe, just maybe, there are people who maintain that view of an oppressive God, and as a result of their view of said oppression, they actually engage in the oppression of other people because they are trying to be like God?
I don't think that's like that's not a frontal cortex kind of thought process, but it's there. Like, that's going on. It's the same reason I think that people don't understand God's justice, because retribution is what we believe should happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I used to think that it was retribution was derived from the penal substitutionary theology. Now I think that we derive penal substitutionary theology from our view of retribution. Like, we want someone to be punished for sin, and therefore, if Jesus is the one who gets punished, we're okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Which also seems a little weird, but it distorts what God intends as justice to
Yeah.
to come to our view of justice. So we've taken the fruit. Here we go back to Genesis 1. We've taken
Mm-hmm.
the fruit of knowledge and good and evil, and because we have the knowledge of good and evil, we think that we have the wisdom of God to deal with that, which is simply untrue, right?
That's a treatable statement right there.
But that's what we've taken. And so because of that, we think that we know how to deal with that, and we deal with that with retribution,
Mm-hmm.
right? An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, right? Like, all of those things are retribution pieces. They're not what God intends. And
Right.
somebody's going to say, well, that's what the Old Testament says. Yeah, but if you look at the law in comparison to, like, the Code of Hammurabi or other ancient Near East codes, law codes, you'll see that the people of Israel were far advanced toward a modern society compared
Mm-hmm.
to their neighbors
Right.
in a non-retribution piece. And then Jesus comes, who is the image of the invisible God, who then says, well, you've heard it said this, and I'm going to say this. And if he's the
Mm-hmm.
one who says it, maybe that's what was intended the entire time.
That's a stellar idea.
I know. It's wild. Thank you, Greg Boyd.
Mm-hmm.
If you want more, see the book Cross Vision by Greg Boyd. Or its other-ish version, A More Christ-Like God by Brad Jurczak.
Mm.
which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed both of them, but differently.
Hey, that's usually how that works.
Yes. I'm sorry for my rant.
Yeah, it's all good.
I needed to yell at some Calvinists. I mean, oh,
Did you just say that out loud?
I did. I did say that out loud. And this week I also said, what did I say? Oh, I challenged someone on, well, we're going to talk about it later, but I challenged someone on the idea that they were like, the social gospel is not a part of the gospel. And I was like, well, if the gospel is justification by faith, you are absolutely correct.
That's not the gospel.
So then they're absolutely incorrect. So,
Like, no,
right.
that whole thing about true religion, widows, orphans, that whole thing in Proverbs 31 about speaking up for the oppressed.
Not important. We listen, the gospel only exists after Jesus is raised from the dead. You didn't know that? It doesn't happen before Jesus rises from the dead. There's no gospel.
You mean the declaration of the
Not
Lord as
there.
King at Jeshurun and Deuteronomy?
Does not exist. It's certainly not when he gets up and says, I came to proclaim the gospel. That
Oh yeah, you mean that whole
Luke
Luke
4.
4 thing?
Nope, doesn't.
You
No,
mean
not there.
that liberty to the oppressed?
Not a part of the gospel. Even though it's the word gospel is there, it's not a part of it.
Sight to the blind, declare the year of the Lord's favor.
Correct. Cannot be possible. All the
People
Old
need to
Testament
read
stuff
that.
has nothing to do with the gospel unless it's foreshadowing the cross and the resurrection.
Mm.
That's what all of my justification by faith friends have told me.
Let me tell you something that's really funny with this whole situation. So you said the term you said social gospel.
I did say social gospel. I don't know if that was the term I should have used, but it's the one that I used.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. What you're really referring to is social justice, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
And so, because you are referring to this whole idea of social justice, what I do, and I think we've had this conversation before, I don't use the term usually of social justice. I use biblical justice
Right.
because when people start talking about the social gospel and social justice, though I would assert that when I read the Bible, I see the principles of social justice like presented in scripture. I always say biblical justice because now all of a sudden, for all those people who get all uptight about social justice, it's like, no, it's biblically based. I think that when I hear about the social gospel, and I particularly caricatures of the social gospel, and people who go out on this whole thing about social justice, what I'm finding is that many of those people, I'm going to speak in a very gross generalization right here for a second.
Right.
And this is why I don't use the terminology. Many of those people are depicted as individuals who are trying to distribute justice devoid of a biblical basis. And what I attempt to do in my use of the terminology of biblical justice is to actually assert that the aims of justice that we are perpetuating and that we are performing are actually rooted in the biblical narrative as a model for how we should be living.
Yes. And because so many people first off, we've talked about it, the view of justice is off. But
Yes.
for so many people, like, again, if gospel is this, it can't be that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if biblical justice says that that's the thing. And so they'll say that you're not preaching the gospel even if you're doing what you're saying.
Right.
Which,
But then I can immediately say, take it up with Jesus, take it up with St. Paul, take it up with St. Peter, take it up with St. James, because at this point, what I'm finding is that you might argue with me based on a societal issue,
right.
but you cannot call yourself a Christ follower and argue with scripture based on what's going on. You can argue with me all day long, But if you are truly going to say that the Holy Scriptures are the authoritative rule for faith and conduct, now you are having to argue against what you were saying is the authority. And if you are arguing against the authority, now I can come in and say, then can you truly call yourself a follower of the way? Can you truly call yourself a follower of Jesus if you are going to argue against Scripture? I remember sitting in a doctoral seminar a few years ago, and I made this statement to this guy, and I said, this is what the Scriptures state right here. And the guy responded with, that may be true, but, and I just went, stop, time out. You, who just made a declaration of sola scriptura 5 minutes ago, are about to contradict Scripture. So let me stop you before you contradict Scripture. So we're going to end this now so you don't actually say something that you're going to regret.
Right. And to bring it full circle, because that's what we do sometimes.
Yep.
That's why I don't think that the depictions of Jesus are violations of the second commandment.
No.
Because, see if I can tie this in well. Properly understood, we look at the Scriptures as a whole, and we see, like you said, biblical justice is clearly what should happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We can see that we should be taking care of the widows and the orphans. The foreigner should not be oppressed in our land.
What?
You know, the wealthy don't get to keep all their money or grain harvest, you know, in an agrarian society.
Mm-hmm.
Right? These things are a part of just ancient Near East life. And if that's the case, then when we look at that second commandment, we see this idea of, first off, it's a carved image, so it's hard to make the painting argument at all. But then again, I don't know if they had paintings back then, so.
But you did have carvings. You did have sketches.
And the main thing was they weren't supposed to have an idol, because idols were the depiction of the gods in Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
And God was trying to make the statement. We have to remember that the Torah itself is a contained volume of books. And so you're going to read this idea that we are made in the image of God, and then you're going to read that you can't make your image of God because, like you said earlier, Dan, he has made his image. So we can't make his image. We can, but that's a whole other process.
That's a whole other process.
It does not involve carving, just in case you were wondering. And so whenever you see that, it's not the depictions of God are against his law.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ancient Near East practice of depictions of God. And then to take it a step further, it's the worshiping of those images. And, are you ready? Here I go. I'm going to do it.
Come on.
If you're defending your image of white Jesus, you're coming real when someone else is telling you, hey, maybe we don't have that, and you are staunchly defending your statue, check your heart. Maybe you're worshiping it.
Mm-hmm.
Like we defend the things that we love, and we defend the things that we worship. Could this be something where we say, maybe we do that. Maybe we change that. Maybe we do something different. Maybe we just take a step and listen instead of throwing up our defenses. That was pretty good, Nikki. We appreciate it.
That was beautiful.
Well, we have gone on a rabbit trail.
But we came back.
We did. We fully discussed what we were talking about. Do we have anything else?
Well, there's always more, Matt,
Well,
but
that's true. But on this topic,
nah, not today.
okay, all right. Well, join us in 2 weeks when we talk about who knows what.
We don't know
Maybe,
yet, but
maybe
well,
repentance. I don't know.
ooh, wait, there was something that we said earlier, and I thought, ooh, we could talk about that.
The Dallas statement. Was that the one? The
It
Dallas
wasn't.
statement
It
was
wasn't
the
that, but
one.
that we could.
The Dallas statement is so rife with it needs to be talked about because of its really bad hermeneutics. It's
Actually,
really
Nikki's still.
funny. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was wondering. I was like, I'm wondering because what we could do. I wonder if Nikki's gonna be willing to give some feedback on this while we're here. Look at all the statements that have come out in the past couple of years, and just look at like where do these statements come from? Are they rooted in some common ideological framework? Because what do you do with the Nashville statement? You have the Dallas statement, the Nashville statement, um, and and that's when I've heard people say, well, everything they said. I mean, they quoted scripture, and I remember I told a colleague of mine one time when they were like, well, they quoted. I was like, and Satan quoted scripture too.
Man,
Your point?
I didn't realize how old the Dallas statement was.
Oh yeah.
I guess I remember it then, like vaguely, but I thought they did a new one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here we
The
go.
thing is, there are some people who don't realize just how old some of these statements are. They recycle statements. I mean, I saw, speaking of statues and icons and whatnot, I actually saw somebody sharing a news story about the removal of the statue of Billy Graham. And
Why?
because there was a statue that was owned by Lifeway, and when Lifeway moved in 2016, they took the statue of Billy with them and took it to the new location.
Okay.
And people are like, people are losing their minds. This is horrible. The statue of Billy Graham was removed. And I actually commented on somebody's post and I said, you obviously did not even read the story where it stated that Lifeway moved. And this story was from 2016, not this year, that Lifeway moved and they took the statue of Billy Graham with them and relocated it since they were changing the locations of their offices.
Okay.
But people were all on the statues being removed. I mean, to the point that if you go and you read the story, there's an editor's note in big bold letters
at
now
the top, because this is from 2016 and it was already
right. This is from 2016, and I mean, this is just how greatly people are aiming to be offended by something in relation to these ideas. When it's like, you have nothing to be offended by. The statue was moved to a new location. No one destroyed it. It was moved. But I want to be offended, so I'm going to try to be offended by something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Nashville statement is the biblical manhood and womanhood one.
Yes.
Okay, that one's really bad too. I read part of that book the other day. I don't even remember where I was. And I picked it up and I read part of it and it made me cry on the inside. Well, and the book is old now. And that's going to make people sad. Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. Recovering by John Piper and Wayne Grudem. Originally published in 1991.
Wait, but there's a new book. Wait, is it out yet?
I don't know.
Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood? Yes.
That's pretty funny.
Wait, I heard about it a while ago, and I was like,
did you ever see the tagline on it?
Wait, the one, the Recovering From?
Yeah, Recovering, a response to evangelical feminism.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And then you have the new one. It's supposed to be a 2020 release, but I think it might have just come out, maybe. Because I think Amy Bird did it, if I'm not mistaken.
Recovering from.
Recovering from biblical manhood and womanhood. And the tagline for that book, oh, it's so beautiful. How the
How the
church
church.
needs to rediscover her purpose.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, May 5th, 2020.
And you know that the CBMW already has a review of the book out, right? Of
I'm
that
sure
book.
that they do. Did you? This is the 2015 book, Recovering from Unbiblical Manhood and Womanhood, a response to evangelical patriarchy.
Wait, who was the author of that one?
Susanna Crizo.
Uh-huh.
Crizo.
Okay. Huh.
Ooh, Amy Bird's got a lot of books I might want to read.
Mm-hmm.
Housewife Theologian. I don't know why.
Yes.
That looks funny. It was a good cover. I don't know who did it, but it's a good cover.
Yeah.
How long is this book? Is it too long?
Ooh, that'd be great. Somebody just asked, oh, it was Nikki. Can we invite Dr. Joy Qualls to join the conversation with us?
I don't know her.
Well, she's getting an invite, I can tell you that much.
That's funny. This one, Recovering From, has endorsements by Jen Pollock Michael. I don't know who that is. Kelly Kapic. I don't know who that is. Caitlin Beatty, maybe? I don't know. And then some guy named Scott McKnight.
You mean the Reverend Dr. Scott McKnight?
The Right Reverend Doctor. Is he Right Reverend? No, he's not.
No.
Right
no.
as a bishop?
Right is a bishop, yes. Okay.
I'm learning, Dan.
You are learning. That's very good.
Because I know that
no,
Right,
he would be the
N.T. Wright is the Right
yes,
Reverend Doctor.
The right, because of the fact that he was bishop. But right. You have to remember this, though. McKnight is a canon.
What is that?
He's a canon theologian. So he's a special appointee by his bishop in the realm of theology.
Fancy. People who bought this book. Oh, no. This is books I might like. Never mind. I have most of these. I already have most of these books.
Well, Matt, I think we've done a good bit of
I need to get me one of them
damage.
canon titles. Yeah, we have. That's true. Well, we should say goodbye to the stream, and then I'll tell you that joke that I didn't tell you earlier, but I don't remember what it was, so maybe I don't tell you that joke. I don't know. That's the problem with doing that sometimes. Well, I remember what it was, and it's pretty funny. You'll like it. Well, we should say goodbye to everyone.
Have a great day, people.
See you later.